Have you ever noticed that some men don't need to argue, explain, or justify? They don't raise their voice. They don't beg for validation. They don't even fight to be seen. They just withdraw. And when they do, something eerie happens. The room feels colder. People grow restless. And silence begins to scream louder than any words ever could. That's not passivity. That's calculated power. Machiavelli understood this intimately. To him, withdrawal is not retreat. It's domination through absence. He wrote, "A prince must know how to disappear without losing his influence. Because absence, when intentional, becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, people don't just see you. They see their dependency, their entitlement, their discomfort with no longer having access to what they took for granted. People don't fear losing your love. They fear losing their grip on you. They don't miss you. They miss their ability to summon you. And if you've been the man who shows up every time, who answers even when it drains you, who explains just to keep the peace, then you've not been loved. You've been used. In the world, Machiavelli describes, predictability is not virtue. It's a liability. The man who is always available is never feared. And a man who is not feared is always controlled. You think your kindness builds connection, but kindness without boundaries breeds contempt. You become background noise, an emotional butler at their service. And every time you say yes when you should have said nothing, you sell your dignity for a temporary sense of being needed. Machiavelli would call that weakness dressed as virtue. He'd tell you never allow your value to be measured by your willingness to please. When you're always there, you lose leverage, you lose scarcity. And scarcity is the bedrock of influence. So the next time you feel tempted to over-explain, to prove your intentions, to reassure people who never once reassured you, don't disappear instead. Not as an act of revenge, but as a strategy of refinement. To reintroduce yourself as a man who is no longer a servant to their needs, but a sovereign force whose silence now speaks louder than his words ever did. Withdrawal is not cowardice. It's evolution. It's the moment you stop reacting and start positioning. The moment you become unpredictable, unreachable, untouchable. And that's when the world takes notice. Because when you disappear without warning, they're not wondering what happened to you. They're wondering what power you've discovered that finally made you stop explaining. If this speaks to something inside you, write it in the comments. I disappear to reclaim my power. And if you want to walk further down this path of silent strategy, subscribe, not to follow the noise, but to rise above it, as the kind of man who no longer chases respect. He commands it by vanishing. If you want to survive in a world ruled by perception, you must abandon the illusion that goodness alone will protect you. Because the truth is brutal. Being useful is not power. Being predictable is not loyalty. And being always available is the death of respect. From the moment you were born, you were trained to be agreeable. Say yes. Don't make waves. Show up early. Answer quickly. Apologize even when you're not wrong. But Machiavelli would smirk at that conditioning. He didn't believe in moral submission. He believed in power management. And if you're always accessible, always explaining, you've already surrendered the throne of your own life. Because the man who makes himself cheap will never be treated as rare. You think your quick replies show commitment. You think your availability builds connection. But what it really builds is expectation. And expectation always kills appreciation. Machiavelli saw through this charade. He wrote, "The man who seeks to be loved by all becomes the slave of the ungrateful." Because people don't respect the man who always says yes. They exploit him. And here's how it works. They send a message, You respond within seconds. They complain. You explain. They create chaos. You provide peace. You become their crisis manager, their validation machine, their disposable shield against discomfort. But you weren't born to be a buffer for broken people. You were born to build a life ruled by your own values, not their moods. Machiavelli wouldn't comfort you in this state. Head awaken you, he'd say, when they expect you. Disappear, when they depend on you. Detach, when they assume you're theirs. Remind them you belong to no one. Because the man who cannot disrupt expectations will be forever ruled by them. You believe explaining yourself makes you noble, but in the eyes of those who manipulate, your explanations are confessions, your transparency is ammunition, and your kindness, without selectivity, is a leash. So what should you do? Break the rhythm. Interrupt the pattern. Withdraw without warning. Let them wonder what changed. Let them feel the void they pretended didn't matter. Let their comfort with your availability collapse into discomfort with your boundaries. This is how you regain control. By replacing predictability with tactical silence. By answering only when it serves you. By remembering that access to your mind, time, and energy is not a right, it's a reward. So the next time you feel pressured to respond, pause and ask yourself, does this person deserve a piece of my inner world? Or are they just addicted to the version of me that never says no? If it's not a clear and powerful yes, it's a strategic no. This is not cruelty. It's clarity. This is not ego. It's sovereignty. If these words sting good, let them burn through the parts of you that were built to be controlled. And if you're ready to dismantle the part of you that was taught to serve without limit, type in the comments, "My predictability is my enemy." And subscribe, not to follow another voice, but to fortify your own. Because from this moment on, you are not their solution. You are not their convenience. You are a man in command. In every war, the smartest generals never fight every battle. They don't waste arrows on illusions. They calculate. They reserve. They strike with precision. Why? Because their greatest weapon is not the sword. It's the energy to wield it at the right time. Now bring that to your life. Every conversation you entertain, every insult you respond to, every little emotional fire you put out for others costs you something. And most men don't even know they're being robbed. They wake up tired. Not from exertion, but from exposure. Exposure to people who drain them. Situations that weaken them. Habits that leak their energy drop by drop, until nothing remains but resentment. Machiavelli wouldn't call it burnout. He'd call it strategic failure. Because the man who wastes his power on trivial battles will have nothing left when the real war comes. And make no mistake, your energy is not infinite. It is currency, and who you give it to is a reflection of who you obey. Carl Jung said every thought, every emotion, draws from a limited reservoir. But Machiavelli goes one step further. He doesn't just protect energy. He weaponizes it. He uses it like a king uses gold, not to be generous, but to gain advantage. You may think you're being noble by showing up, by responding to every cry for attention, by defending yourself in meaningless arguments. But here's the truth: every time you react, you're being profiled, mapped, predicted, controlled. Manipulators don't need to overpower you. They just need you to waste yourself. And you do it willingly, in the name of kindness. But what you're really doing is surrendering your kingdom. Machiavelli would never allow that. He'd instruct you. Withdraw your energy from the useless. Let fools destroy themselves in the silence you no longer break. Because when you stop giving them what they want, your validation, your time, your attention, you become dangerous. They'll call you cold, distant, selfish. But Machiavelli would smile, because now, you're no longer predictable. You're no longer easy to provoke. You've become unreadable. And the unreadable man, he becomes ungovernable. You were not meant to pour yourself out like a public fountain. You were built to guard your inner fire like a fortress. Because when your energy is sacred, your presence becomes rare. And when your presence becomes rare, it becomes power. So here's your command: stop defending yourself in pointless battles. Start conserving yourself for real ones. The next time someone demands your reaction, pause. Ask yourself, do they want resolution? Or do they just want control? If the answer is unclear, default to silence. Not because you're weak, but because you're done being played. Type this below if it hits. My energy feeds no fools. And subscribe if you're ready to defend your power. Not with noise, but with ruthless clarity. Because from here on out, you don't react. You calculate. You conserve. You rise. Silence is not retreat. It's not surrender. And it sure as hell is not weakness. Silence is a setup. It is a trap wrapped in stillness. It is the weapon of those who no longer dance to the noise of others. Machiavelli never saw silence as absence. He saw it as camouflage. He wrote, "The wise man does not need to lie. He only needs to withhold. Because in a world where everyone's shouting, the man who says nothing becomes a threat. When you go silent, you disrupt the pattern. You remove yourself from their script. You become unreadable. And what people can't read, they can't control. Those who once praised your goodness, your availability, your kind heart, begin to squirm when you no longer play along. They used to call you kind. Now, they call you distant. They used to say you were dependable. Now, they say you've changed. But understand this, they were never complimenting your character. They were complimenting your compliance. They didn't admire you. They admired their control over you. Machiavelli knew this well. He believed that when silence enters the room, it doesn't calm people. It exposes them. He'd say, silence doesn't confuse the strong. It only terrifies the manipulative, because silence breaks the mirror, and those who used you to see a reflection of their comfort now see only themselves, and most cannot bear what looks back. They loved you, as long as you were predictable, as long as you were their echo chamber, their rescuer, their distraction. But when you fall silent, they're forced to face the emptiness they were hiding behind your presence. And this is where the mask collapses. The ones who smiled in your face will accuse you. They'll label your silence as arrogance, your boundaries as cruelty, your growth as betrayal. But don't react, because in that moment you are watching their illusion unravel. Carl Jung called it the breakdown of the persona, the mask we wear to be accepted, to be liked, to be safe. But Machiavelli would frame it differently. He'd say, only when the mask falls does the game begin. Because now, you're not who they want you to be. You are who you choose to be. Not polite, not predictable, but powerful. You no longer explain. You no longer soothe. You no longer respond just to keep peace. Let them misinterpret your silence. Let them spiral. Let them dig their own psychological graves trying to decode your stillness. Because the greatest exposure doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from withdrawal. So, here is your internal command. Do not explain. Do not chase. Do not clarify. Let the silence speak. Let it rattle the ones who built their worth on your obedience. And if this speaks to the part of you that's done performing, write this in the comments. My silence is the end of their illusion. In a world addicted to noise, silence is rebellion. And in a game of power, silence is dominance. When you stop reacting, you don't just avoid chaos, you control it. You flip the board. You walk away from the rules they tried to bind you with. Suddenly, they don't know what you're thinking. They don't know how to trigger you. They don't even know if you're still in the game. Machiavelli once wrote, "It is not always necessary to strike. Sometimes, not moving at all is the most terrifying strike of all. Because when you withhold your response, you create pressure, a vacuum that forces the other side to talk more, reveal more, panic more. And in that panic, they give themselves away." Most people have been trained to respond instantly to every insult, every provocation, every emotional bait. Because the moment you react, they've got you. You're no longer sovereign. You're being pulled by invisible strings. But when you resist, when you say nothing, they collapse under the weight of their own projection. Because manipulators hate silence. They can't use it. They can't control it. And they can't predict it. You don't need to shout. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to win arguments. Because silence is the death of their narrative. It unravels their manipulation without you lifting a finger. Carl Jung believed silence connects you to your true self. But Machiavelli would take it further. He'd say it disconnects your enemies from theirs. It turns their aggression inward. It lets them destroy themselves in the void you left behind. This isn't weakness. This is siege warfare. Psychological dominance through stillness. They spend, you conserve. They attack, you observe. They burn out, you sharpen. So here's the rule: he who speaks first exposes first. He who reacts loses the frame, but he who holds his silence owns the moment. Let the silence stretch. Let them feel it. Let their own words echo back with no reply to hide behind. Because in silence, you reveal everything while showing nothing. If this resonates, write it in the comments. My silence commands. You were conditioned to justify your silence, to apologize for setting boundaries, to defend your need for solitude. You were taught to make sure everyone feels comfortable, even if it means betraying your own peace. But Machiavelli would call this a fatal mistake. He wrote, "He who justifies his every step gives others the right to question it. And once they feel entitled to question it, they will never stop. Every time you say, 'I'm sorry I didn't reply,' or 'I was just overwhelmed,' you reinforce a dangerous illusion that you owe them an explanation for living life on your own terms. But you don't. You never did. Your silence is not an offense. It's a declaration. Your boundaries are not cold. They're the architecture of your self-respect. Your detachment is not arrogance. It's the recalibration of a man who finally sees how much he's given and how little was ever returned. The moment you stop explaining, you reclaim something sacred: authority over your own narrative. Because when people grow used to your explanations, they stop respecting your instincts. They start expecting you to justify your every move. And when you don't, they panic. But that's their discomfort, not your obligation. You are not here to soothe everyone's fears. You are not here to be universally liked. You are here to be clear. Clear about who you are. Clear about what you tolerate. Clear about who gets access to you. Machiavelli knew this well. He said, "A ruler must choose between being loved and being respected. Only one of these ensures order. Too many men choose to be loved, and in doing so, they become servants of emotion, slaves to perception. They give their energy to everyone, except themselves. But clarity is a sword, and silence is its sheath. You wield both when you stop defending your peace. So the next time someone says, "You've changed," just smile. Not because they're wrong, but because they've finally noticed. You're not here to be accessible. You're not here to be explainable. You're here to evolve. And evolution doesn't come with a permission slip. So let them speculate. Let them misinterpret. Let them create stories to explain what they're no longer allowed to access. Because every man who rises into sovereignty must first face the guilt of no longer being available to those who only loved his obedience. If you felt this shift in your soul, if you know this transformation is happening in real time, then carve this into your identity. I owe no explanations for protecting my peace. There is a kind of pain few men talk about. It doesn't come from betrayal, or failure, or loss. It comes from the silence that follows your withdrawal. You stop replying. You stop explaining. You step out of the roles they cast you in. And suddenly, the noise fades, and the stillness begins. At first, it feels like freedom. Then it feels like doubt. Then it hits you, the loneliness, the emptiness, the unfamiliar quiet where their expectations used to live. You start to question yourself. Did I go too far? Was I too cold? Did I just destroy the bridges I needed? But Machiavelli would meet you in that silence with something colder than comfort. He'd say power is not born in applause, but in isolation. And isolation is not punishment. It is purification. This isn't the pain of losing people. It's the pain of losing the version of you who needed their approval, who lived for their validation, who stayed in rooms just to feel useful. You're not suffering from solitude. You're suffering from withdrawal, from the addiction of being needed, from the comfort of being expected, from the illusion of being liked. Because every time you said yes just to avoid tension, you said no to yourself. Every time you showed up to prove you're good, you stepped further away from what made you powerful. Machiavelli would call this what it truly is, a strategic death. The kind of death that precedes rebirth, because until the obedient version of you dies, the sovereign one can't emerge. Let it hurt. Let it burn. Let the echoes of your old self scream in protest. Because that ache you feel right now, it's not weakness, it's detox. And what's rising in that void is something far more dangerous than anything they've seen before. A man who no longer needs permission. A man who doesn't explain. A man who disappears and returns as his own force of nature. Carl Jung called this individuation. The process of integrating your fragmented self into something whole. But Machiavelli would frame it as a transfer of power, not given to you, but taken by you, from the hands of those who once fed on your need to be seen. It will be uncomfortable. It will feel unnatural. But so does every great transformation. The lion isn't born in a crowd. He's born in solitude. He roars not for approval, but because he finally remembers his own voice. So don't run from the pain. Stand in it. Let it cut. Let it cleanse. Let it crown you. You didn't lose them. You lost the illusion of them. And in doing so, you found yourself. If you feel this shift rising from deep within you, then write it in the comments. My solitude is my sanctuary. There is a difference between being seen and being remembered, between being around and being respected, between being liked and being valued. Most men confuse attention with influence, but Machiavelli understood something deeper. He wrote, The prince, who is always seen, becomes ordinary. But the one who controls when and how he appears becomes unforgettable. Your presence used to be constant, predictable, accessible, and that made you convenient. Not powerful, because what is always available loses its mystery. What is always accessible loses its edge. And what is always present becomes invisible. You showed up before they even wondered. You responded before they even missed you. You explained before they even questioned. And in doing so, you trained them to treat you like a background character in your own life. But here's what no one ever told you. Scarcity creates value. Distance crée désir. And absence, when intentional, réchappe perception. You don't need to vanish. You need to become strategic with your presence. When you speak too often, your words lose weight. But when you speak less, every sentence lands like an earthquake. When you're everywhere, you become noise. But when you appear only when it matters, you become signal. Machiavelli would call this calculated absence. Not to play games, but to build gravity. He would say, let them feel your absence, so they remember the cost of your presence. This isn't manipulation. It's asset protection. Your time, your energy, your mind, your emotional bandwidth. These are not donations. They are investments. And not everyone qualifies. So here's the new standard. Not everyone gets a reply. Not everyone gets an explanation. Not everyone earns your presence. The more they assume you'll show up, the more you must challenge that assumption, because when they don't know where you stand, they begin to feel your power. Think of gold. Its value isn't in how bright it shines. It's in how rare it is, how protected it is, how difficult it is to reach. So ask yourself, why should your presence be any less valuable? Why should your attention be handed out like a free sample? The man who is always seen is soon forgotten, but the man who chooses when to enter, how to speak, and when to vanish becomes a presence they fear to waste. This is not arrogance. This is sovereignty. This is the behavior of kings, of generals, of men who don't exist for convenience but for consequence. From now on, your attention is currency. Your presence is leverage. Your absence is a reminder. So ask with every message, every meeting, every interaction, is this person earning my presence or expecting it by default? And if you feel that shift within you, write this in the comments. My presence is earned. What you've just walked through is not a guide to being liked. It's not self-help. It's not therapy. This is war. A psychological war. A war between who you were trained to be and who you must now become. Machiavelli never promised peace. He promised clarity. He didn't teach comfort. He taught control. He didn't value kindness without power. He valued power disguised as kindness and withdrawn when kindness becomes a leash. If you've paid attention, you now understand one truth that governs everything. A man who does not command himself will be commanded by others. And command begins with one act: withdrawal. Withdrawal from weakness, from over-explaining, from emotional servitude, from being the man who shows up for everyone but himself. When you withdraw, you create distance. And in that distance, you become mysterious, unreadable, uncontrollable. That's the foundation of real power, because when you no longer respond on demand, they don't just question where you went, they question what they lost. And when you no longer justify your decisions, you don't just create boundaries, you create standards. The moment you stop chasing clarity in others, you begin building certainty within yourself. You stop performing. You stop apologizing. You stop explaining your evolution to people who only knew your obedience. Machiavelli would tell you this power is not granted. It is taken, and it is sustained not by force, but by calculation. You are not here to be emotionally available. You are not here to be understood. You are not here to be accessible. You are here to lead your own inner state like a kingdom. To decide who enters, who stays, and who never gets a key again. This is the Machiavellian man. He doesn't explain. He doesn't react. He doesn't beg to be seen. He speaks when it serves him. He vanishes when it strengthens him, and he returns only when the terrain favors his move. Your new life does not begin with applause. It begins in silence, and it ends in dominance, not over others, but over the one thing that has always been stolen from you, your self-command. From this point forward, let others gossip. Let them speculate. Let them miss you. But you withdraw, you observe, and you return only when it serves you. Because as Machiavelli knew, the game doesn't belong to the honest. It belongs to the prepared. And now, you are